With the thorax, we're talking about the body part that is in charge of locomotion. So the insect's legs are always attached to the thorax, and their wings, if they have them, are also attached there. So all of the legs and the wings, they're on this part. If you see a drawing of an insect and it's got legs on the abdomen, that's incorrect. They're all attached to this middle piece. So let's talk about wings first. Insects are the only invertebrates to have evolved wings. That's lucky for us, right? That means we don't have flying spiders or flying crabs coming and hitting us in the face ever. But these wings are important for them in terms of moving around great distances or hunting. They're usually membranous, so they're kind of see-through and kind of delicate. They're filled with veins that help to move their version of blood into the wings. And if you see an insect that can't fold its wings up like a dragonfly, that's a more primitive insect. It evolved a long time ago. Wing folding, like you see on the carpenter ant on the right, is far more advanced. That's an important trait that they have that helps them to be able to crawl in small holes. A dragonfly, it can't hide very easily because it would tear its wings off if it tried to get into a cramped spot. Not all insects have wings. Some of them have never adapted to have wings, like silverfish and firebrats. Others may have wing pads, like a bedbug, that never develop fully into wings. They just have these little nubbins on their back instead. And so there are wings, but sometimes you may not see wings. That doesn't mean they're not an insect. It just means it's not part of their overall body plan. They all have 3 pairs of jointed legs, so 6 total legs that are attached to different regions of the thorax. The thorax is a cylinder that we can divide really into 9 pieces. But the 3 that you need to remember are the prothorax, the mesothorax, and the metathorax. So pro means first, so it's the one that's closest to the head. Meso means middle, it's in the middle. Meta is the last one, and it is closest to the abdomen. And when the legs are talked about, they would be the pro legs, the meso legs, and the meta legs. And that's, again, important when you're using different identification guides. They may use that nomenclature. When you look at an insect leg, it's very similar to ours in design. Maybe not in function, but in design. We both have a coxa, which is the ball that attaches to a hip joint. So ours goes into our pelvis. Theirs goes into those different spots on the thorax we just discussed. After the coxa is the trochanter, which is a stem-like piece that leads into the femur, and then the tibia, and then the tarsi. Their different piece is the pretarsi, which are the claws at the end of the insect's foot. Think of them like our toenails, basically. When they walk, they use a tripod walking motion. They always have 3 toes on the ground all the time. If I were in front of you, I would act it out for you, and you would all laugh at me for looking very silly. But they like to keep those 3 on the ground so they're stable and secure. There are many different kinds of legs. The most basic of them are called ambulatory or cursorial or walking or running or simple legs. These are found on most of the insects in the world, and they're just used to run. They're just the basic legs that get the insect around. Some of them use them to go quite fast. We have a tiger beetle on the left here, very quick insect. Cockroaches can reach pretty high speeds with theirs as well, and that's a cockroach leg there on the right. Some more evolved legs would be ones like the saltatorial or jumping legs. We see these on grasshoppers and crickets and fleas. These are similar to walking legs, except for the femur is big, it's enlarged, and there's more muscles in there that helps them to be able to jump great distances. Others include the clasping legs. Part of these legs have turned into a pincer-like structure, sort of like a carabiner that you might use in mountain climbing. These are most common in the lice. So a head louse, like you see in this image here, part of its legs have turned into these clasping claws that they grasp onto surfaces with. Lice have claws that are different depending on where they live. If it's a bird louse, they live on feathers, so their claws are adapted to hold on to feathers. If you have a head louse on a human, their claws are adapted to hold on to your hair. That's why chickens can't get head lice and we can't get bird lice. These are very adapted claws that only work on their primary host. Now you're all itching because we've been talking about lice, I'm hoping. Then we have natatorial legs. These are also known as swimming legs. The legs, part of them are flattened out into a paddle-like organ, and typically they're quite hairy, and this is just surface area to move water out of the way. Diving beetles, giant water bugs, water boatmen, back swimmers like the one on the right here, all of these insects have these natatorial legs. I'm not convinced that Michael Phelps, underneath his human arms, doesn't actually have insect natatorial legs that help him to swim as good as he used to. But these help them to just swim through the water and function better in their aquatic environment. Some of the final legs I want to mention are fossorial legs, also known as digging legs. This is where tibia and tarsi have been turned into a scraper-like organ that helps to move dirt out of the way, sort of like a bulldozer. We see these on a lot of beetles and also on the mole crickets, which is what you see there on the right. The last leg I want to mention is the raptorial legs. These are also known as grasping legs. We see these on mantispids, on predatory bugs, and on mantids. These are legs that part of them have sort of turned backwards, and they have backward-facing spines on one side, and when they close it, it's like a bear trap. They swing it shut, and they crunch their food into there and move it up towards their mouth so that they can eat. It's just a highly modified predatory leg. And they can hurt. If you get your finger in there in a mantid's legs, those spikes can get into you as well. So you do have to be careful when you handle specimens with raptorial legs. Now we're going to end by talking about the abdomen. This is the business end of the insect. Externally, what you'll see on it are the tympanum, the hearing organs, and the spiracles, which are the breathing organs. Internally, if we were in person with each other, what you would be doing right now is dissecting a grasshopper with me. I thought about mailing you all grasshoppers, but they frown on mailing liquids. So we just have to imagine dissecting these grasshoppers together. But if you cut it open, what you would find on the inside is a lot of pieces that make up the cardiac system, the nervous system, respiration, and digestion. But mostly the abdomen end is focused on sexual reproduction. So what we see on the outside are things like cerci. Cerci are sensing organs. They're basically butt antennae that go on the back of things like silverfish, mayflies, earwigs, and cockroaches. So they can be used to touch things behind them, like for the silverfish. They can be used to produce pheromones or to sense pheromones, like on roaches, or they can be used for defensive purposes, like with the earwigs. You may also see at the tip of the abdomen an ovipositor. If the insect is a female, she may have this long sword-like structure that she uses to slice holes to lay her eggs or to dig a hole to lay her eggs like this Katie did that you see on the screen. In other insects, this has been modified into a defensive organ. If you look at the bees, the female queen has an ovipositor that lays eggs, but all of the female workers below her, their ovipositor has turned into a stinger for defensive purposes. So instead of eggs, it delivers poison into your body, and that's how the sting hurts you. So you can see that at the tip of the abdomen. Close to the thorax, you may see a tympanum. This is an eardrum-like organ. It's this yellow oval that you see on the image on the right. It's a stretchy membrane located over a hollow area, and it vibrates when the air moves around it. And so this is how insects hear. Instead of having their ears on their head, they would have their headphones like I'm wearing closer to their midsection. I'd have it around my stomach instead. You would also see spiracles, small dots along the edge of the insect's body. These are part of a complex series of network tubes that are the tracheal system. So these spiracles are holes where the insect breathes in. We're going to talk about insect blood here in a moment, but their blood doesn't move oxygen around. They have to have tubes that go everywhere, all over the place to deliver their oxygen. So when you look along the edge here, you see these spiracle openings that they can open and close to let air in, or close if they get thrown into some water so that they don't drown as much. So these spiracles are just the external opening for their breathing apparatus. If you were to look inside, you would see that compared to us, their nervous system and circulatory system are reversed. If I had you lay down on the floor with your belly on the floor, and I asked you where your heart was, is it closer to the floor or the ceiling? You would say the floor. Your spine is closer to the ceiling. For insects, that is reversed. Their brains would be along the floor, and their hearts are along the back, closer to the ceiling. Their circulatory system is open. Ours is closed, so our blood stays in our tubes all the time. With an insect, they have multiple hearts that suck up free-floating hemosil and then pump it forward into their aortal tube. At the end, it's just like a garden hose. It spurts out, and then it floods the body, and it moves around food, energy, basically, and can also help to carry away wastes. So they do have sort of an immune system, but when you cut an insect open, you're not going to see this gory red mess like you would with a person. It's kind of green or brown. They don't have hemoglobin, so their blood is not red. It doesn't carry oxygen around. It just carries away bacteria or helps to carry nutrients to different systems. They do have more brains than us. They have that main brain in the head. Then they may have 3 thoracic ganglia that help to move their legs, and then abdominal ganglia, anywhere between 3 and 6 of those, that help to move certain organs, to help breathe, to help activate different pieces of their body. So these are just some images of brains and the nerve cord that runs along the bottom. No hard encasement like our spine, just this open nerve cord across the bottom. This multiple brain system helps them to fend off damage. If they lose their first brain, they can't see or feel anymore, but they can still walk around. It's important for things like mantids because in a mantid mating, sometimes she may turn around and eat his head during the mating process. And what we have found through research is that this actually helps the male to mate better. Once you remove his main brain, he actually mates with more abandon, is how the scientists describe it, and he impregnates the female better after doing that. So it's sort of an adaptation to have these multiple brains, to be able to survive losing one, to keep doing the things that you need to do to survive, to walk around, and even to mate in certain situations. We'll finish up by talking about digestion. Insects do have a complete digestive system, which means that there's a mouth and an anus rather than a combined organ like you would see on a jellyfish or a starfish. And so they eat, the food goes through their midgut, their foregut, and the thorax, down into the midgut and the abdomen. There are things called the Malpighian tubules, which serve as kidneys, and then they have a hindgut, which is sort of like their colon. So a lot of these organs are located in the abdomen. Oh, I was incorrect. We do have the reproductive systems to talk about. So they use internal fertilization most of the time. Some insects do leave an egg somewhere and then the male fertilizes it later, or the male may leave sperm packets on stalks and then the female picks them up and uses them. But for the most part, they mate directly, like you see with these beetles and bugs and butterflies here. The internal reproductive system is very similar to ours. There's the ovaries. There's a spermatheca where the female stores extra sperm that she's going to use later on in life. There are accessory glands that help to activate everything. The male has testes where the sperm is stored, and then he has a seminal vesicle that it travels down before he injects it into the female, and she keeps it in her spermatheca. And as the eggs fall down, she inseminates it and then lays the egg. She leaves these in different spots, either in clusters or spread out, depending on the species. And then they go through either complete metamorphosis, where they're an egg, and then a larva, and then a pupa, and an adult. They look very different from their childhood stage to their adult stage. Or they can go through incomplete metamorphosis, which is an egg, and then nymphs that look very similar to the adult. They just get bigger and grow wings when they become an adult.